Hey there, Vernacular Faithful. Redcoat here, and I've got another little recording for you. But today, I wanted to I wanted to do another pitch for you. So today's pitch is going to be for a new Star Fox game. So, noting the rules that I mentioned before with regards to what Nintendo looks for in their new projects. They're always looking for something that moves a particular franchise forward in a unique and interesting way. And you can see that in the later, perhaps somewhat failed entries in the Star Fox series, particularly with the Star Fox Dinosaur Planet, which was a reskin of a different earlier game that was meant for the N64 but ended up coming out on the GameCube, if I'm remembering correctly, where Fox basically became Link for a period of time, which is interesting. I think there was something there, but it needed to cook a little bit more. I might talk a bit about what I think would be a good thing for a Star Fox landing on the ground doing stuff, but that's not really the thing I'm looking at here. This is for more of a mainline series thing, and we've had other entries. There was a tactics-ish title where you would actually have on the 3DS, I think, where you would actually have a side set where you were moving your people around, and then you'd actually go in there and fly through a thing, and then come back out and deploy your mans while also dealing with stuff. So that was interesting, but that wasn't really what I would say is in the concept of the composite game experience. That was adding another framing mechanic on top of what was the core mechanic. And in reality, because of that disparity where the framing mechanic was changing how the core mechanic was being deployed, there was a bit of a dissonance there with them kind of fighting each other for what's the core thing, at least in my opinion. And of course, the other one that I should mention as well, Star Fox Zero, which was kind of a bit of a return to form, and also grabbing a concept that they had put into Star Fox 2, which was the mobile mech armor thing. And so that actually showed up there, and then they also added helicopter-style scenes and gave Slippy something to do rather than just getting chased around constantly. But the one that I feel most successfully managed to achieve kind of the feeling of what a Star Fox game kind of evokes and feels was actually Star Fox Assault, which is interesting because that was an outsourced game that was outsourced to, I think it was Bandai. I forget if they were Bandai Namco at the time, Bamco. But was outsourced to, it was either Bandai or Namco, one of the two. And that one in particular, it did a lot of the standard stuff. You had the corridor scenes, you had the tank scenes, but in that one they took the all range mode and applied it to the tank scenes, and they also allowed you to do on foot stuff, which we saw a brief amount of in Star Fox 64 during the multiplayer side of things. So they just kind of expanded on those aspects of things and leaned really hard into the corridor combat dealing. They also added a Wing Rider segment, which basically amounted to just being a kind of a bland-ish forced scrolling shooting. And so all of that said, seeing all of the different directions that Star Fox is kind of wibble-wobbled in. Oh, right, I should also mention Star Fox Zero did implement a cockpit mode because it was made for the Wii U, and that allowed for the player to kind of look around the cockpit. However, my statement there is that is something that isn't even necessarily in the framing space of things. It's actually down in the refining space of things, where it changes a few things about how you do stuff, but it doesn't really shift the paradigm of what you're doing. So when looking at making an extension to a franchise as varied, but still seeking a core change as Star Fox, the first thing to understand is there's a core, and then you have some framing elements that are repeated throughout the franchise. And ideally, what you want to do is you want to keep the core, but you want to update the frame and create some new frames to put on top of it. The Star Fox formula in particular, generally speaking, the core is, of course, the core to combat, and specifically your actions that you're taking is aiming, shooting, and dodging. And so almost everything else, any other Star Fox game that really feels like a Star Fox game, the reframing sections still allow for you to do that: aim, shoot, and dodge. It's just, it changes the nature of it. Whereas in the corridor spaces, it's a set path. You can memorize everything that's coming at you, and you can get a very good sense of what's going on. With the Landmaster and all range sections, now you still do have to do aim, shoot, dodge, but now you also have to find target, and also there's a lot more reactionary. It's a little bit more jazzy than the others, which are a lot more composed, to use musical terms a little bit. And coming off of that, you have the Wing Rider sections, which takes away one of the aspects of it, which is why they feel a little bit lacking, is you no longer have the dodge, you just have aim and shoot. So with all of that said, what's an addition that I think would be good enough to actually make a new franchise entry? So there's a reason why I ran through all of that list and I kind of stopped on Star Fox Assault. Because when I saw the Wing Rider sections, I saw something that I thought was pretty interesting, and a new paradigm that they could do. So the thing with the Wing Rider section, right? So they took away the dodging aspect. So what you do is you add that back in. And how do you do that? Well, you make it so that instead of just standing in place on the wing as you kind of move slowly forward, you let the player actually wing walk. Now, wing walking is something that it has actually been done in real life, where a person gets out of their plane, stands on the wings of the plane, and walks to and fro. It's actually a big stunt kind of deal. So the very concept of doing that in space, basically, we lure it away as they've got some new mag boots that allow them to stand on the outside of ships. Probably something that they made because they had to do a hot fix on the Great Fox at some point, and so somebody had to actually go out, do a spacewalk, with the tether and everything, get to the outside, and then walk on the thing. So you have your lore exploration for why you can actually stand on the outside of the wing. And the idea would be that you actually have 3 or 6 positions, possibly 7, or 4. The basic idea being that the 3 positions are middle of the ship, right wing, left wing, and then off of the ship, hanging by your tether. And if we go to the 6, then that means it's right side up, 3 positions, upside down, 3 positions. The reason why it's specifically sectioned into those is because now we have a very clear paradigm of attacks can come from these different areas. And so when a situation happens, an attack could be coming where it covers everything underneath, and so you've got to get up on top. Or an attack is coming to where it covers just the 2 sides, and so you have to get into the middle, either top and bottom. And then for an extremely dangerous attack, there's one section of safety that you have to get over to. And you're doing this while aiming and shooting at enemies. So this is an initial kind of core concept for the thing. And again, there's a lore way to explain why you have this. Now, I didn't mention the off behind position. So this would be something to kind of give the player a second chance so they don't just get clipped and knocked off. if they hit an object, because it makes sense for you to not just bowl through the object as the R-wing would, but instead get knocked off, and take a good deal of damage by doing so. And so the concept would be that then you'd be hanging on by a thread behind the ship, being dragged behind it, and there'd need to be a time limit where you need to pull yourself back on, probably something like mash the buttons, pull yourself back onto the ship. Because the tether only has a certain amount of strength. You're flying at who knows how fast, so it makes sense that with that amount of strain, eventually it will break. And so the more times you get knocked off, the more chances you have to just get knocked off, and the tether just snaps, and you just fly off into the far reaches of space. And so that's one of the reasons why you try to avoid getting hit by objects. And obviously objects would also just deal damage to you. So that would be kind of the idea there. But there's also the concept of actually allowing that as a means of, how would I put it, in case of emergency, jump off the ship to avoid attack. So if there's something that specifically hits all of the zones, then jump off onto your tether and hope that you've still got enough strength in it to hold you on. So already there's a lot of little dynamic things that we can do here design-wise, as far as, structuring boss encounters around hitting different zones on the space. And of course we still have the standard charge your shot, line up some things, shoot the different stuffs. And I haven't done anything to really change the core play of the game. We've just added a new frame for it. So to go a little bit further, and this is more deriving some stuff from the lore surrounding it. So if this is wing walking and everything, there's another element that can be there, which is specifically other wing walkers. I mean, it would make sense that you could have it makes sense as a means of attacking people, particularly for a more let's say barbaric or more space pirate-y format, that you wouldn't just have people flying around in fixed wing fighters to attack each other, but you could actually have people jumping off of leaping off of things, doing their own form of spacewalk, linking onto a ship, and then literally tearing the wings off and defeating them that way. So with that in mind, this gives us two options here. Now, the one of them is specifically just a specific type of enemy, which is dudes that will actually get onto your ship at a certain position, and you need to get over to them and beat them up and knock them off. So that is one particular thing that gives you a new enemy type. And I mean, you can even go a step further, because just as you have your tethering to your ship, there can be enemies that actually tether to the ship, and you need to either shoot the tethers before they get pulled onto the ship, and things like that. I mean, there's some interesting stuff that you can do there, particularly when dealing with not just other starfighters and things like that, but also space animals that will normally you expect that's what they're going to do, is they're going to glom onto the ship and try and gnaw it to death, right? So that is another angle there as far as just things you can do. And I mean, you can even do that in boss fights, where a boss is it shoots out its tendrils, it grabs the ship, it's pulling you in. You've got to beat the tendrils off before it pulls you fully in, which might distract you from dealing with something else that they're doing, they're charging a shot while they're doing that, and all of this different stuff. So again, there's some cool dynamism there. And the other thing that this opens up is the reverse, where instead of the enemies jumping onto you, you're jumping onto the enemies. So this would be something that really, I think you could only do in the all range mode situation. Where there's probably some big enemy ship, and you need to there is something on there that you need to disable, perhaps a shielding nodule, or there's a big cannon on it and nobody can really get at it, so they throw you out there to to basically tether your way onto the ship and then get to the thing. So this would be a lot closer to the grounded. This would be a lot closer to the grounded scenes that you find in Star Fox Assault. The difference being that we would also allow this to be an actual spacewalk. So to kind of go back to what that term is, spacewalking is when you actually go out of. It's something that actual astronauts do, where you have a satellite and you've got a little tether and you've got a seat that you're in and it's got some thrusters and you can kind of boost yourself around, but you got the tethers so you don't just fly off randomly into space with infinite acceleration, because that's the thing that happens. And basically you can kind of maneuver yourself around, and usually they use this for doing live repairs. Hence why I mentioned the whole idea of where the mag boots would come from for actually for the origin of the mag boots for wing walking. So with the spacewalk idea, actually allowing Fox and crew to have some sort of omnidirectional thruster, some hyper technology that they have, because they're always like at least 1 or 2 steps ahead of the rest of the Lilat military, and allow yourself to do some free movement, but specifically having the ability to link onto things and pull yourself to them, and do like some of the enemies are doing in other scenes where they're linking onto you and trying to rip your wings off. You can link onto them and just beat the crap out of their cockpit and then leap off to the next ship. I think there's some interesting stuff there, and of course you'd need to have some aiming aid and stuff like that to really help out with it. And I think also not do a one-to-one representation of what spacewalks are, because spacewalks are generally slow. Because, good lord, if you actually try to do that fast, you'd probably fly off into who knows where very, very quickly. But in this case, we're in the fantasy realm, so we can Gundamify it, as I would say, which is somehow they're able to go. So maybe not give the character quite that much thruster fidelity, but give them a good amount of ability to move pretty fast, with the tether being probably the fastest way to do things, and also one of the easiest ways to just stay on an enemy, to where you don't actually have to navigate anymore. You can just focus on aiming, shooting, and dodging. Which again, we come back to the core of the Star Fox genre, the Star Fox games, which is it is about aiming, shooting, and dodging. So all of this would be done in the context of combat scenarios. We wouldn't implement some all-range sections similar to what they have in, say, Rogue Squadron, where Rogue Squadron is a lot more about. It's a little bit more flight simulator. Well, closer to flight simulator, not quite all the way there, and it's more about finding the target and destroying it. The dogfighting concept is really less emphasized. Rogue Squadron is definitely more about executing on military operations as the aerial aspect of it, which makes sense. It's deriving off of books that are all about military jobs done in space. Where Star Fox is definitely more about the sentimentality of it, the fantasy of just getting into some crazy dogfights and doing feats of daring do. Less more flying ace kind of deal. So yeah, that's my thoughts on what you would do to actually take the Star Fox genre the Star Fox games forward into their next entry. A way to make it so that this new game actually has a place. There's a reason to play it, as opposed to the others. But the others still have their place too. Where you go back and you play those ones, like, oh man, this is cool. And then you get to this one and you've got like all of this extra stuff that really makes it unique. but it's still centered around the core mechanic of aim, shoot, dodge. Aim, shoot, dodge. That's what you do in the game. Everything else frames that. So that is the pitch. Let me know what you think, if there's something I missed there or some other concept. But I suppose I should also, for the fact that I'm focusing on the mechanical identity of the game, I should also mention something on the narrative identity of the game, because it hasn't really evolved. I mean, and this is a general thing with the Nintendo games. They're definitely more gameplay first, and I understand that. And I thought it was interesting what they did in, well, what technically Namco did in Star Fox Assault, which was, we moved away from Andross as the main villain, and we still had a bunch of other characters featured in there, right? And even going a step further and letting Andrew try and fail at being the main villain. And the 3DS title also tried to do something like this, where it was basically an encroaching force. So in Assault, it was the Atheroids, which was a force from outside of the galaxy moving in with all of this crazy, weird technology that just completely upends everything. And in the 3DS title, it was some fish race that was coming in, so another idea of just like it's another race of beings where the lilac beings, assumedly they're the furry race. Forgive the phrase, but I mean they're all furry. They all have furs. So they're the mammals. And then, so they dealt with the fish. The Aperoids were more insectoid, so they were dealing with insects and a lot of the stuff that kind of goes with that. We see that motif in a lot of sci-fi things where there's an incurring force, and it's modeled after insects because that's very alien to us, and makes for a very, very simple villain to deal with, and also gives a very strong narrative structure for them to operate off of, with the whole hive mind idea. It's like it writes itself, basically. So for my 2 cents, I think one way that you could really do this, and I mentioned this briefly, that it's kind of a space piratey thing to be writing on the outside of your ship, doing hotfixes this way. So I think one way to really kind of capitalize on the popularity of a very specific character would be to make the main villain of the next game the Starwolf team. Just straight up, it's them. There's something that they're doing that is actually causing things to go awry. Now, I know they're supposed to be another mercenary band, so it's a little bit weird for them to actually be the core villain. But still, I think there's something to be said for taking some lower level characters that were in a non-arch villain spot, give them the role of actual villain, or at the very least, even if Starwolf isn't necessarily the main bad guys. Although I think you're missing an opportunity if you don't at least do one entry where they are, leaning into the keeping the peace angle of things. So going away from the galactic campaign idea, kind of bringing it back in a little bit, localizing it a little bit more, and making it more about just protecting the space lanes from space pirates. And there's been kind of a rise of them, and so you're dealing with various incursions from them, and slowly but surely breaking them down. You could even have it be where there's multiple different sects that you're dealing with. Although I think for simplicity's sake, just having it be one big one with maybe one pirate coalition per se. Maybe that's why the whole thing is happening, is because the pirates have gotten organized under Starwolf, perhaps, and kind of go from there. I mean, the other thing, but yeah, that's my thought. I think that would be a way to do it so that it's not quite, you're not moving into the external force comes in and starts wrecking the day, and everybody's trying to learn how to deal with them. But letting it be something that is actually local to the Lilac system and something that kind of makes sense. But yeah, no, I actually, me and a previous designer, we worked on a whole story relating to that. Well, so that's a little bit of where that's coming from, but I think it does make sense as a narrative direction. Anyway, um, all that aside, that's the pitch, and I am curious to hear what you guys think of it. If you think it's like, wow, that's out there, no, I hate it, it's terrible, or maybe it's like, oh, that's really cool, yeah, that's cool, awesome, yeah, but maybe do this. Either case, yeah, that's the thing. Anyway, I know nobody's really watching these, but I figured I might as well put it out there. So this has been Redcoat of Vernacular Games. As you can tell, things are continuing to change. I am actually on the floor here, um, and yeah, we're still working on stuff, but I'm in a bit of flux at the moment, and we're still putting together the micro games. We've still got a mid-level game in the works. Moved away from working with one client and started up some new projects in the comics realm. Not certain when those will turn out, but we're still in the negotiation stages, so figuring out exactly what we're going to do there. And yeah, like I said, I'm basically in the process of moving. So as much as I wanted to start recording comparison videos where I'm actually playing an indie title and then comparing it to the game that inspired it. I'm gonna have to wait on that, but that's some of the content that I want to start doing in the future. So, keep your eyes out for that. And yeah, I will catch you guys in the future. So play the games you want to play, boyos. This is Redcoat, signing off. The songs presented in this particular recording are various remixes of Star Fox songs from various different entries. One of them in particular, if you can find it, is actually from the Dinosaur Planet, while the rest of them are from the more, I'd say, standard entries. With that in mind, go ahead and check out Overclock Remix. That's where I found them all. I highly recommend you check them out.